Today's video is going to be the return of funny one-star reviews. If you don't know, this is a series on my channel that I started years ago where I would take what I thought were very amusing or really long-winded or really angry reviews for books, sometimes that I loved, sometimes books I didn't really love. Didn't matter, I just found reviews for books that I thought were really funny, and then I would share them with all of you. I've done this for a lot of different books at this point, so for this video, I'm actually going to be doing negative reviews for a few different popular fantasy series. One would be Mistborn, one would be Wheel of Time, and one would be the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. For the Wheel of Time and Mistborn ones, they will not contain any spoilers. The Acotar one, kind of, sort of. It's for the third book in the series, so inevitably there might be some stuff that you don't want to know, but if you don't mind being spoiled or if you've read them and you want to stick around, then I think that it's a pretty amusing review. I laughed out loud quite a few times. I do want to say, if you are somebody that has a hard time hearing negative things about some of your favorite books, you might find yourself getting a little frustrated, maybe you're going to get a little agitated, maybe you're going to sweat a little. And if that's you, then you might need the product from today's sponsor. Native's deodorant is going to have you feeling very fresh. They have a plastic-free deodorant that uses the same formula as their regular deodorant, but with more sustainable packaging. It's made from paperboard, and Native is a proud partner of the 1% for the planet, which means that it commits 1% of plastic-free deodorant sales to environmental nonprofits. The texture is really nice, it's not sticky, it dries quickly. It's also aluminum-free, paraben-free, vegan, cruelty-free. I actually have 4 different deodorants from them. I think my favorite one is the Cotton and Lily, although they're all fantastic. The Cotton and Lily just makes me think of really nice, clean, fresh-smelling laundry. If you're interested in the other scents, Lilac and White Tea has this freshness to it that is really, really nice. Lavender and Rose is a little more earthy. It makes me think of being out in a nice, lovely garden. And then the Rosé is exactly what you would expect. It even has a little wine glass on it. They have a lot of other scents as well, so you have a wide range of choices. They have new limited edition and sensitive scents being released all the time. I have a code, it's Elliot, which will save you 25% on your first Native plastic-free deodorant pack. And you'll want to make sure to check out Native's new limited edition coffee house collection. For the fall, you get 3 plastic-free deodorants that are normally $39, but if you use that code Elliot, you'll get them for $29. Jumping into it, I'm going to start with one from the Wheel of Time series. This actually comes from book 8. I specifically wanted to find non-spoiler reviews for books later in series because I was very curious. A person that's gotten that far into the series, because this is book 8, I was thinking, why didn't they stop before? What led them to finally be like, you know what, I hate this series? And I found the greatest review, I think. I think it's very funny. If you're a Wheel of Time fan, buckle up. How dare she? Is by far the most popular phrase in this series. This, the 8th book of the Wheel of Time, is the last book for me. I'm thoroughly convinced that either Jordan thoroughly hated women or that he, in fact, had never met one. I will take the time with my final Jordan review to list this book's and series' sins. 1. Women's issues. At first, I thought it was just certain characters who were incredibly annoying, being at the same time precocious and petulant. No, it's all of the female characters, and most of the male characters save a few who seem to be more or less faultless. Every woman in the series is, without exception, a completely awful person. Imagine if Twitter were used to replace the dialogue in your favorite fantasy book, and I think we would have another Jordan masterpiece. Nothing that any character says to another gets met with tacit agreement. The women in these books greet every statement with derision, disapproval, distrust, and as often as not will respond with how dare he, she, they, in response to whatever is said. It doesn't matter if the topic is related to daily chores or the end of the world. Every woman in this book snaps back at every other woman like a bitter harpy. They go on to address the fact that the women are always annoyed with each other to some degree regarding their chests. And it says, Jordan used the word bosom at least once per page throughout the thousands of pages. Why? Because one character or another is showing too much of their bosoms. Of course, this offends the other women, who are usually showing too much bosom themselves. We never discover the right amount of bosom. We never learn what it means for a dress to be too tight around the hips. Another clothing faux pas that really pisses off many of the female characters. Outside of the dialogue, the narrative describes women in one of 3 ways: pretty, handsome for older women who were once pretty, or some lengthy description to make that character very unattractive. Fat, short, stout, hawk-nosed, etc. Of course, how attractive a person is in this series really doesn't matter because, drumroll please, no one ever has sex. No one ever even flirts. But that is for the next section. I like women. I like women a lot, but I think if all I knew about women had come from a Robert Jordan book, I'd never, ever, ever want to meet one. There is so much more. This is the only review that I'm going to be reading off for The Wheel of Time, but it's very long, so it might as well be a lot of different reviews. The next point is sexuality. There isn't any. Sci-fi and fantasy has a tendency to be sexuality light. However, when our main characters, all 18 to 20-somethings, discover that they have superpowers and are needed to save the world, it makes sense that these young, attractive people with superpowers would also do it. A lot. They don't. They are embarrassed by the slightest flirtations, even several books into the series. When two of the characters do eventually get married, one can assume that there's some conjugal conjugations then, yes? No. At least nothing is ever described in print. We read about a kiss or two, and that's it. The complete Kama Sutra of Robert Jordan is, you can kiss if you are married and not be embarrassed. Well, not too embarrassed. 3. Friendships. There aren't any. All the main characters are a-holes and never treat anyone as a true friend. The secondary characters, who do make friendly overtures, are sent off and spend hundreds if not thousands of pages wandering through the weeds, wondering if they will ever see their so-called friends again. When they actually profess that a certain person is a friend, I'm ejected from the narrative in disbelief. I know what a friend is, and there isn't a pair of friends anywhere in the series to be found. Ironically, there is one character named Loyal, pronounced Loyal, who is actually loyal to his friends. He chooses to befriend the main characters in the story. In turn, they treat him like garbage, inviting him along only when they need him and telling him to F off the rest of the time. Point number 4, IP theft. Everything in these novels has been stolen from some place else. The Trollocs are troll orcs, Matt and Perrin are Merry and Pippin. The plot begins as a hybrid of Lord of the Rings and Star Wars. There is little or no originality to speak of. The one power is the Force. The Angreal are Force crystals. Oh, it just goes on and on and on. The only way to truly enjoy the series is to make it your very first sci-fi fantasy series, and you won't be distracted by the outrageous theft. Point 5, not pet-friendly. With a plotting 1,000-page per episode pace, not a single character has a pet of any kind. Fantasy books should have fantasy pets, shouldn't they? Jordan makes all ravens evil. I don't like that, with ravens possibly being the next smartest animals on the planet after humans. Point 6, filler. This series is the all-you-can-eat buffet of the fantasy genre. Pages and pages of nothing. Characters are spun into existence and never heard from again. Women talk endlessly about how much of their bosoms are showing, only to show more of their bosoms later. As the action meticulously, painstakingly, plottingly unfolds, a group of the women go into the dream world to describe to one another what has already happened in the narrative. Hooray! Did reading about it once take too long? Well, buckle in, you're going to read about it again. Point number 7. Prophecy. Being able to predict the future is impossible. Making a good guess is improbable. Building it as the central mover of the plotline in a series is inconceivable. I know how the series will end. The main characters are invincible, so they will all make it to the end. The lone hero will beat the lone bad guy. Why do I have to read about all these totally annoying characters if I know what's going to happen? Well, in fact, I don't. They are too annoying for me to even jump ahead. I'll take Jordan's word for it that the prophecy is ineffable. Well, that's it. There are certainly other things that I dislike in this series, but I could write a whole other series talking about them. Not only have I decided to quit the series, but I think I need to take a break from reading altogether. Like the sickly taint to the one power in the book, Jordan has added a sickly taint to the reading in general. Yes, my friends, it is that bad. If you are a Wheel of Time fan, I'm very sorry for you. I will now hurt myself by reading some negative reviews for Mistborn. I have done an entire one of these dedicated to the first book in the Mistborn series, and despite the fact that I'm going to be reading negative reviews for the second and third books, again, no spoilers here, so don't worry if you haven't read books 2 and 3. I promise there's nothing. You're not going to have to be worried about spoilers for anything, which this first review proves it. It says, and I believe this was for the Well of Ascension, "For the first time, I believe I'm an environmentalist. I feel sorry for all the paper that was wasted on making this book." This one, I always see this come up for Sanderson books, and it just always amuses me. It says, "Thinly veiled Mormon propaganda. Avoid." I'm just very curious. Did anybody ever convert to Mormonism after reading a Sanderson book because they're like, wow, this fantasy story is making me think about our own world. What religion could possibly be like this? Which, by the way, I've talked to people who are Mormon who had no idea that Sanderson was Mormon originally when they read the series. But anyway, I digress. This next one says, I only slogged through to the finish of this one so I could find out the ending. Should be called The Doubt of Ages. This is for the Hero of Ages. As so much of the book is about one character or the other doubting whatever it is they are doing. Some entire chapters were mind-numbingly boring as we got to hear over and over again why this character doubted themselves. This book also seemed to repeat concepts and thoughts repeatedly from the earlier books. The metals and how they work, why character A feels this way about character B, remembrances of events and how they make them feel. What I find kind of amusing about that is the last point they made. I love that. In books, I love when characters think back to things from the past because I'm like, oh, so realistic. And I think it's a very human thing to do. It kind of shapes who you are. But, you know, not to everybody's liking. This one says, very bad. Feels like reading a narrative of someone playing a console game. I stuck with it and read the whole trilogy because my young teens really enjoyed it, but I could never overcome the bountiful defects and just enjoy it for what it is. This one, again, this is for a book later in the series, doesn't spoil anything, but I read this and I was like, what? It says such a predictable, unoriginal ending. This epic story deserved better. I didn't think that it was a super predictable ending, but that's just me. This is just a part of a long review, but this part made me laugh quite a bit. It says, Surgeon General warning. Any and all drinking games involving the frequency of phrases such as my dear man, raised an eyebrow, and landed maladroitly in Sanderson novels are strictly prohibited. If you engage in this activity, you will die of alcohol poisoning. Okay, this review in and of itself, I don't think is that funny, but I'm a little confused. It says, and this is all it said, lost interest after reading the first two, and just read a plot summary of this one to have closure. The third book, the final book in the original trilogy. Not a bad book at all, though. I know many people who really enjoyed it. I much preferred Sanderson's later books. So, this is a 1-star review, and they say, I just read a plot summary of this one to have closure. So, did they rate and review a book that they didn't read? I know that's not that bizarre because you see that all the time on Goodreads where a book that's not even out yet that people don't have access to ARCs for will leave reviews. But still, that's usually because people are either really excited or for some reason hate the author or something like that. But I don't think I've ever seen somebody rate a book 1 star after reading a plot summary of it. Anyway, now on to the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. Just to reiterate, again, these aren't, I would say, hard spoilers here, but there are going to be references to specific characters, which would reveal that later in the series these characters are alive, or sometimes it's referencing certain events that aren't a huge deal, like conversations between characters and things like that. But again, I know I want to be sensitive to spoilers for people, but this first one is not a spoiler at all. It says just what I expected. And then they write, DNF, seriously, anyone who manages to finish this book deserves an award. And then they have a picture from the Toy Story, and it says, there seems to be no sign of intelligent life anywhere. This next one is the one that does reference a few things, and it is the last review that I'll be reading. I won't even be reading this review in its entirety because it is exceptionally long. I didn't read through all of it earlier, but I'm going to read to you highlights of it. It's, I think, quite funny. So it starts by saying 202. That's the number of times that the word mate in any of its forms is used in this book. 202. That statistic alone should be enough to justify this 1-star rating. If you feel satisfied enough to just remove yourself from this review, run with that feeling, because I have like 7 pages of stuff to complain about. That's if I'm efficient. And I've never been an efficient reviewer. Once in my life, I counted 202 uses of a word over 700 pages. That shouldn't scream rational and in control of her passionate fury to you. So buckle up, Buttercup. We've got some categories to run through. They start with Reese. Reese makes me cringe harder than Renee Zellweger in Bridget Jones's Diary. At least that movie has both Colin Firth and Hugh Grant to distract me from Renee viciously critiquing her own body and like spilling coffee all over herself or whatever. He is capable of 2 actions, like a mildly impressive Ken doll. 1, sex person, and 2, valiant hero trying to kill himself in the name of his friends constantly. Either he is full on Feyre, or he must be actively prevented from jumping in front of poisoned weapons with the half-hearted motivation of heroism to save my family, even if it's not at all clear why doing this would save them, because whatever, none of the plans in this book make a lick of sense anyway. Because, as if this book weren't fun enough, it rivals the Fast and Furious franchise for use of the "my real family is the one I made, not the one I was born with" cliche. Like Rhys, Feyre also manages to find time in her packed schedule of sex scenes and repetitive dialogue to be incredibly, incontrovertibly dumb. It's no wonder that the thing Feyre used to do called painting is dropped like a hot potato. She never does it, but it's mentioned a handful of times in the beginning of the book, and then forgotten, and then, suddenly, almost at the merciful end of this suffering, quote, "the movement so perfect that I knew I'd one day paint it." We're still pretending that Feyre paints? Between the same diverse selection of identical sex scenes, identical training scenes, identical war discussion scenes, I don't think she has time for something as banal as a singular interest or hobby. I don't know if we'll have time. I think she'll have to get to third base with Rhys and a perfumed bath later. At least Feyre is brave and strong though, which is why she's too tired to do anything after a long day of watching other people fight in a battle, followed by more winnowing her home. So courageous. How does she do it? Plus, she's a brilliant friend, which is why when Morgan confronts her for lying, leaving, making her and everyone else fear she has died, and also making more responsible for it, Feyre's response is, "Oh yeah? Well, you have a crush on Asriel." Truly a depiction of a powerful woman for the ages. And I don't get Lucian's appeal. Do we like him out of the same reason we like Draco? I'm saying we, as if I like either of those characters. Is it an OMG, he's just trying to do the right, he didn't know any better type of situation? Because Draco is a child trying to impress a father who doesn't love him, and I still don't totally buy that. I'm still not a Draco fan. And Tamlin is not Lucian's daddy, although maybe a more interesting book if he were. Cassian and Asriel are both flat and boring. Amren is characterized so inconsistently that it's impossible for me to know whether I like her or not. I'm going to say not. Seems like a safer bet. Nesta is almost cool, but the whole "I am mean and hard and damaged" thing goes too far. And Elaine just floats around and lets things happen to her. Morgan, never all that interesting, now just represents the worst bisexuality rep I've ever read. It's never a good sign when you're praying for characters to die in battle so you can catch a break. Their next thing says the writing sucks on both copy editing level and a substantive level. I truly believe that whatever team of sad sacks was assigned to copy edit this book was physically unable to attentively read it, and I cannot blame them, but it does allow for some hilarious mistakes to make it through these dull pages. Example, she did not avert her eyes from the Morrigan. That pesky "the" makes her seem like a pro wrestler or someone with a fun nickname, rather than the personification of the worst bi rep to ever grace young adult pages. Also, a monster creature thing described as having no eyelids narrows its eyes. This inspired a 15-minute long discussion with my roommates on whether eyes can narrow without eyelids. We came to a unanimous consensus. No, they cannot. What is this attempt at high fantasy language? Except then, Rhys and Feyre and the gang are also so hip and cool and up to date that this book uses the word effable, a word so slangy that my laptop recognizes it as a typo for suckable or faceable, whatever those words are. Otherwise, the only other remarkable attempt at making this any different from the way humans speak in 2017, the use of the word male. Women are sometimes called females in this, but are also called women and girls and whatnot. Men, on the other hand, are absolutely only called males. There's an amazing moment where Sarah J. Maas references to Rhys as a man, and then instantly, corrects herself. So it reads on the page as man-male. It makes no sense. I love it. It truly is the little things. They go on to talk about some lines of dialogue that they feel are just incredibly generic, and they have these quotes. It says, nearly every line of dialogue in this section is just a cliche, and so I will copy and paste them here for your perusal and accompanying amusement. First quote, leave this world a better place than how you found it. Next quote, one life may change the world. Next quote, I believe everything happens for a reason. Next quote, it is the family you make, not the one you are born into, that matters. One last little thing of theirs that I wanted to mention is this. It says irrelevant complaining. And they say the only way to make the experience of reading a deeply unpleasant extremely long book worse is to publish that book with tissue paper pages. This was like reading the Bible, but without the action and with a whole lot more smut. That's it for some reviews that I found quite amusing. Hopefully you did as well. If you would like to see me do something like this again in the future, let me know. I'd be happy to do so. And if you'd like to see more of the funny 1-star reviews or book roasts where I read off your negative feelings about books, then I'll have my playlist linked. Don't forget, of course, to check out Native. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite one of these was. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.